Welcome back to MHS, Midnight Horror Stories. I know that many of you turn to these videos as a gentle way to unwind and ease into sleep. So, before you drift off tonight, could you help me with a small favor? Just leave a quick interaction, a comment, a like, or let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. My goal is to hit around 200 likes within the first 24 hours. Simple actions like these help YouTube appreciate the content and spread the show to more people. Now then, let's dive into tonight's horror stories. I'm 28 now, but I still remember a terrifying event that happened when I was 22 and in college. At the time, I was living in a pretty big house in Orlando, Florida, with a spacious yard and a large swimming pool. I lived with my parents, and both of them owned their own businesses and often traveled for meetings and conferences. One week in late August, when both my mom and dad were out of town, I asked for their permission and was allowed to invite a limited number of friends over for a pool party in the backyard. I was excited and surprised that my parents trusted me enough to host a small party, but my mom emphasized the promise of no alcohol, no loud music, and everyone going home at a reasonable hour so as not to disturb the neighbors. I called my 6 closest friends and told them about the pool party. I limited each person to 1 guest. Everyone accepted almost immediately, happy to come, and asked if they should bring snacks and drinks. Remembering my parents' instructions, I ignored their conditions and allowed my friends to bring alcohol. That night, most of my friends arrived. They wore colorful swimsuits and brought a lot of alcohol. My friends took turns playing music. They all brought their girlfriends or boyfriends, who I all knew, making a total of 13 people, including me. We lit a bonfire and started drinking, laughing, chatting, and snacking. After we had enough energy and a little buzz to get us in the mood, everyone started getting into the pool. I sat by the fire, watching them splash around, have fun, and felt proud as the host. The party went on for almost 2 hours longer than the time my parents had given. It was almost 11 p.m., and most people were still in the pool, listening to music, getting snacks and more drinks. I went inside for a few minutes to get more alcohol when I heard a noise from the bushes on the side of the house. My house has a gate and security cameras all around, so security is pretty good, and I didn't pay much attention to the noise. I figured some of the couples were enjoying some private time. I went back to the backyard and stood by the pool, telling everyone it was almost time to end the party. That's when I realized that only 10 of the 12 guests were still in the pool, while the other 2 had disappeared. I went back inside, walked around, and heard laughter echoing from upstairs. In my drunk and tired state, I was too lazy to go upstairs and tell them it was time to go home. But before I could go back to the backyard to end the party, a horrifying scream suddenly ripped through the night air, coming from the pool. I rushed outside and was stunned by the sight. The water was stained red, and red streaks were spreading under the yellow light. My close friend was standing at the edge of the pool, his body trembling, yelling in a panic that his girlfriend was swimming when she was suddenly pulled underwater. She screamed and thrashed, and then blood started to spread everywhere. My other friends in the pool were swimming toward the edge in a panic, their faces pale with fear. And then, from the pool, a strange face suddenly surfaced. It was a man, probably in his late 20s, with long, wet hair. He was big, with several colorful tattoos on his muscular body. He jumped out of the pool, to the horror of everyone. Then, without a word, he ran straight through the backyard, across the lawn, and toward the front gate at an incredible speed. Some of my friends who were still sober quickly jumped out of the pool and tried to chase him, but by the time they got to the front gate, the stranger had vanished without a trace in the night. We all rushed to pull the injured girl out of the pool and take her inside. Blood was still flowing from the wound on her leg. It was a very deep and long cut on her calf. The couple from upstairs heard the screams and also rushed downstairs, their faces scared as they asked what was going on. My hands were shaking as I locked the door and called 911 for an ambulance. When the police and paramedics arrived a few minutes later, they quickly checked the injured girl's condition and carefully put her in the ambulance. My remaining friends left the house one by one in silence. They were still terrified by what they had just witnessed, and they all shook their heads in confusion, unable to believe what had happened. The police and I looked at the footage from the security camera system around the house. To my surprise, we discovered that the moment I heard the rustling in the bushes on the side of the house was when the stranger appeared. Somehow, he had found a way to get past my family's fence and security gate without triggering any alarms. On the screen, we saw him sneaking through the garden on the side of the house, then calmly walking into the backyard as if he were also an invited guest. Finally, he silently got into the pool. I was so irresponsible for having fun and being drunk that I didn't bother to check the surveillance system. I accidentally created an opportunity for a stranger to break into the house, and such a serious incident happened. I gave the footage to the police, but to this day, they have not been able to identify the intruder. And of course, when my parents came back, they found out what had happened. I received very strict punishments from them and was never allowed to host a party at home again. I'm Allison, 18, top of my class and supposedly all set for college. At least that was what my parents, teachers, and friends all thought. What they didn't know was that 6 months ago, after a messy night with Dylan, the quarterback, and my ex, I had been hiding something huge. My blue prom dress was loosened up after I told my mom I was stress eating from exam pressure, but it was still squeezing my stomach so tight I could barely breathe. That night was prom night. The flashing lights on the hotel dance floor were making my head spin a bit. The mix of heavy perfume and booming music was making me feel sick, but I kept forcing a smile. The first pain hit while I was dancing with Lucy, my best friend. It was like a sharp contraction tearing through my lower body, locking me up completely. I stopped dancing, trying to catch my breath. "Allison, are you okay?" Lucy looked really worried. "Yeah, I'm just tired," I said, lying through my teeth while another wave of pain started creeping in. "I think I should go outside to get some air." I pushed through the crowd. No way, there were still 3 weeks left. Another wave hit, even worse this time, and I had to grab the wall just to stay on my feet. Something wet started running down my leg. Completely freaking out, I bolted into the ladies' room at the end of the hallway. Luckily, it was empty. I locked the door to the last stall and sat down. Red liquid was pouring down my legs, making a little puddle on the floor. The next pain came fast, so strong I had to bite my lip to keep from screaming. Not now, not here. Hands shaking, I pulled out my phone but had no idea who to call. My parents? They didn't even know I was pregnant. An ambulance? Then the whole school would find out. Dylan? He was out there dancing with his new girlfriend. Time felt like it froze as another wave of pain slammed into me, even worse than before. I couldn't stop the groan that came out of my throat. A crushing pressure built up and I clenched my teeth, pushing hard without even thinking. My phone slipped out of my hand and hit the floor as I grabbed the toilet seat, my whole body shaking from the pain. The next contraction hit like a tsunami, totally taking over. It felt like my whole body was ripping apart. Sweat was soaking the back of my dress, and my hands kept slipping on the toilet seat. The pain was worse than anything I'd ever felt or even imagined. More than anything, I wanted my mom here with me right now. I clenched my teeth again, feeling something shift inside me. A wave of unbearable pressure, then a sudden slide that knocked the air out of my lungs. And then I saw the head, the shoulders, the rest of the body. Finally, a tiny whole body slid out. It just lay there between my legs, still attached by the umbilical cord, small and pale. I reached out and touched it, felt the soft, cold skin. There was no cry, no movement. "No, no, please, no," I whispered, picking up the baby. I patted its back, rocked it, did everything my instincts were screaming at me to do. But those little eyes never opened. This awful emptiness just swallowed me whole. The fear had turned into straight-up panic. People would find out, they'd know everything. All my plans, all my dreams, everything I was working toward, it would all be gone. My eyes scanned the bathroom and landed on the little trash can next to the toilet. There was a black plastic bag inside. Without thinking, without even feeling, I just tried to move gently. My vision blurred with tears as I tied the bag. I moved like a robot, wiping myself with toilet paper, trying to get rid of any trace. The music from the ballroom was still thumping through the walls. I unlocked the stall door and stumbled out. I washed my hands, touched up my makeup. Back in the ballroom, I held my tiny purse in front of my dress to cover the bloodstains and made my way to the exit. Just get out of here and go home. But I didn't even make it that far. A scream echoed from the bathroom I'd just come out of. One of the cleaning ladies had found it, and the whole place started buzzing. Someone was yelling for the cops. I couldn't move. Everything around me was spinning. I saw people staring at me, then down at the blood on the bottom of my dress that my little purse wasn't hiding anymore. I looked down and saw tiny drops of blood on the carpet, making a trail from where I stood all the way back to the bathroom. I heard police sirens blaring outside. Lucy's face popped up in the crowd, her eyes wide with shock when she saw my dress. "Allison, is that blood?" The lights above me felt blinding. All the sounds around me started warping. The floor felt like it tilted under me, and then everything went black. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed. A cop was standing at the foot of the bed, and my parents were right next to me, their faces pale and streaked with tears. My mom was holding my hand, but I didn't feel anything. "Why did you go through all this alone?" I just stared at the ceiling, the image of holding the baby and feeling his cold skin playing over and over in my head. The cop was saying something, but I wasn't listening. I heard the cop's voice, words like suspect, criminal investigation, trial, just floating in the air. But none of it meant anything to me anymore. They were just distant, hollow echoes. As sunlight started flickering through the hospital window, it hit me that prom was over. But it wasn't just prom. Everything I'd ever dreamed of was over too. I'm Mia, 22, and a recent college graduate. I work at a coffee shop downtown, which is also where I met and started dating Matthew. Our first date was at a cozy Italian restaurant. After dinner, neither of us wanted the night to end, so Matthew suggested we go to a club a few blocks away. I was excited because I love to dance. The club was crowded, and we had a great time dancing for hours. While we were at the club, we met a man named Luke. He was confident and had a very charming demeanor. Luke introduced himself as Hot Tub Luke, a nickname I didn't think much of at the time, just found it a little odd. Luke invited us to a party at his house. A few other people around us also got invited and seemed excited. They all decided to share an Uber to Hot Tub Luke's place. I was thrilled, thinking it would be a great opportunity to make more friends and have new experiences. Matthew seemed a little hesitant, but I convinced him, and he went along with it. When we arrived, I was genuinely stunned by Luke's house. It was a large and modern 2-story home. Inside, everything was sleek and expensive. There was a huge living room, a full bar stocked with all kinds of liquor, and glass doors that led to the backyard with a hot tub. The party started quickly, the music was loud, and people started pouring drinks. I got swept up in the lively atmosphere. The hot tub was very popular, and people were readily taking off their outer clothes and jumping in. Even though I didn't get in the hot tub, I was having a great time dancing and talking to others. However, Matthew didn't get into the party as much as I did. He wasn't dancing a lot and kept looking around as if he was evaluating everything. I noticed Matthew watching Luke a few times, but I didn't think much of it. Around 2 a.m., when I was still having a blast, Matthew came over and said we should go home. I was surprised. Although it was late, the party was still going strong. I said I wanted to stay a little longer, but Matthew was firm. He said he was tired and didn't want to linger. I was a little annoyed and thought Matthew was spoiling the fun. But I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so we called a taxi and left. The ride home was quiet. I was still buzzing with excitement, but Matthew seemed distracted. He didn't say much, just stared out the window. I figured he was just tired or didn't like parties. The next morning, I woke up to a phone call from an unknown number. I answered, and it was the police. They asked if I had attended a hot tub party the night before. I quickly confirmed that I had. The police asked me to come to the station to answer some questions, which left me confused. On the way to the station, my mind was racing. I had no idea what was going on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. At the station, the officers were very serious. They asked about the party, such as when I got there, who I was with, and what I had seen. After that, they told me the reason for their call. A girl at the party had been sexually assaulted after Matthew and I left. The police didn't go into detail, but said the incident was very bad, and Luke was the perpetrator. I was in complete shock. I had been having the time of my life in a place where such a disgusting crime was happening. The police asked more questions about Luke, but I didn't know anything about him besides his charming and elegant demeanor. The officers added that they had found a lot of videos and pictures of parties, and even Luke's crimes stored on his computer. This made me feel sick to my stomach. The man I thought was just a fun host was a predator, and I had been in his house completely unaware. Leaving the police station, I felt shaky. I couldn't stop thinking about how close I had come to something horrific. I felt stupid for not realizing it. But more than that, I couldn't stop thinking about Matthew. Thanks to Matthew's determination and caution, I was saved from something terrible. I texted Matthew as soon as I got home. He came over that afternoon, and I told him everything the police had said. Matthew looked pale, probably also in shock. I asked him why he was so insistent on leaving the party. Matthew said he didn't feel comfortable and didn't trust Luke. It was a gut feeling he had from watching how Luke acted. He was always hovering around the girls, encouraging them to chug their drinks. Matthew didn't want to scare me at the time, so he just said he was tired and wanted to go home. I hugged him and thanked him so much. In the following weeks, I followed the news about Luke. It turned out his real name was Chris. He had been doing this for years, hosting big parties, luring young girls, and then taking advantage of them. Chris finally went to court a few months later. I wasn't called as a witness, but I followed the case online. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. This brought a sense of justice, but it couldn't erase the harm he had caused. This incident changed the way I see seemingly harmless situations and the importance of being more careful with strangers. Matthew and I are doing very well. I'm so grateful to have him by my side. Ryan and I have been close friends ever since I was 7. We used to be neighbors, and we were very mischievous. When Ryan and I were 16, our appearances were truly strange. I had piercings in any spot I could, wore bright neon colors, and had long hair that covered most of my face. Ryan, on the other hand, preferred a rather slick look, having all his hair and eyebrows shaved, and wearing tight-fitting clothes. At the age when many psychological changes occur, we became even more disliked in the eyes of everyone in the neighborhood. Not a single family was unaware of our bad reputation, nor any of them had ever escaped our bizarre pranks. However, we would only take things as far as playful teasing, with no intention of hurting others or engaging in criminal activities. Let's see what game we'll play today. According to the list, which house should we go to? I discussed with Ryan. The house at the end of the street just had new people move in, Ryan said. Is it that abandoned house? I asked, surprised. Let's go check it out. We were both really excited. The abandoned house at the end of the street was forgotten, but Ryan and I loved it. We even called it our secret base. It was true that someone had moved in because the front door had been replaced, and the surrounding area had been tidied up. Ryan and I approached and knocked on the door after curiously surveying the house. The door slowly opened, and a woman appeared. She had pale skin, sunken eyes, and a completely expressionless face. I guessed she must be in her 60s. Hello, ma'am. We live in this neighborhood too. You just moved in, right? I confidently greeted her. What is it? Her voice was so cold that I shivered, and there was a very unpleasant smell. I was stunned, staring at her face until Ryan nudged my arm gently. We have a small gift to welcome you, I said. presenting a small box. The woman stared at it for a moment before taking it, and the unpleasant smell returned as she said thank you. Ryan tugged at my shirt, and we quickly left. We peeked outside the gate to watch the woman's reaction to the gift we had given her. She opened the box, and a toad jumped out, but contrary to our expectations, she remained completely calm. "What? Is this the first time we failed?" Ryan exclaimed, surprised. "Did you smell that really awful odor earlier?" I asked Ryan, who looked at me puzzled. Ryan and I turned our gaze back to the woman. Both of us froze as we watched her stuff the creature into her mouth and chew ravenously. "Elton, did you see that?" Ryan's voice trembled. I didn't answer. We could both clearly see the frog's hind legs still swaying in rhythm with her chewing. I pulled Ryan away, both of us silent with our own thoughts. Eventually, we agreed to keep observing that woman. The next day, after school, we watched her again, but from a different angle. It seemed like she lived alone. After a while without seeing her, we were about to leave when we heard a noise. The woman had returned. It turned out she hadn't been home all this time. She was carrying a large sack, but she was surprisingly agile, which is unusual for someone as old as her. Whatever was inside the sack seemed to be moving. However, it didn't seem to interfere with the way she swiftly dazzled between places. "Neither of us would be able to move it, Elton," Ryan whispered. "I've told you before, she's all but normal," I muttered. But the surprises just didn't stop there. The woman went toward the backyard of the house, pulling out a healthy, living chicken from the bag. Ryan and I both understood that the bag was filled with chickens, and there must be dozens of them inside. The chicken struggled violently, flapping its wings wildly, its beak screaming in fear. The woman, without a moment's hesitation, gripped the chicken tightly with both hands and suddenly bit down deeply into its neck. The sound of flesh being torn apart rang out. Hot red blood splashed out, flowing down her face and hands. The woman's mouth was full of blood, red patches of raw flesh between her teeth. She chewed voraciously, the wet crunching sound echoing in the still air. The chicken was still alive, writhing in pain, its eyes wide with panic as life slowly drained from its body. Ryan's lips trembled slightly. He seemed desperate to say something, but couldn't get the words out. I swallowed hard. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth, my hands gripping Ryan's so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Cold sweat rolled down my forehead, each drop falling onto my face, merging with the thick, suffocating atmosphere of fear. We wanted to look away, but we couldn't. Our eyes were glued to the scene of the crazed woman, ravenously gnawing at the chunks of the chicken, while our bodies trembled, on the verge of collapsing under the weight of the horror overwhelming us. Ryan's backpack dropped to the ground, cutting through the eerie atmosphere like a knife. The woman turned towards us, her gaze like a jolt to the brain, snapping us back to reality. Ryan and I ran without pausing to grab our backpacks, our hands tightly clasped together. When we got to Ryan's house, his parents saw our frantic state and thought we had just gotten into trouble again. Both of us hurriedly recounted the incident, but all we got in return were annoyed expressions from Ryan's parents. We stormed back into Ryan's room. "Are you saying we should go back to that creepy woman's place?" Ryan exclaimed when he heard me mention wanting to figure things out. "Your backpack is still there," Ryan, helpless against my convincing reasoning. That evening, we arranged to conduct our investigation after dinner. Ryan's backpack was still there. There was a faint sound of crying, but loud enough for me and Ryan to hear. We exchanged glances, searching for the source of the sound. From inside the house, the woman emerged, still carrying a large sack over her shoulder. She set it down in the yard, slowly removing the outer layer to reveal a trembling little boy around 5 or 6 years old. Immediately, I grabbed Ryan, holding him tightly with one hand while covering his mouth with the other. With a sudden motion, she grabbed the child's wrist and yanked him toward herself. The baby screamed in fear, but the scream was quickly muffled as her bony hand tightened. Her fingers dug into the child's skin. She leaned close to the baby's face, smelling the scent of the soft skin, her eyes sparkling with madness. "Fresh meat," she muttered like an evil curse, her voice mixed with crazy laughter of someone who had completely lost their reason. Her hands clawed and her mouth opened wide as if preparing to tear the baby apart. Ryan and I shouted loudly, rushing to pull the baby out of that crazy woman's clutches. The brawl quickly got everyone's attention. They quickly arrived and called the police. The woman tried to run away but was stopped. She emitted a smell that made everyone hold their breath. The police showed up to control the woman. Inside her house, countless pieces of bones, meat, and other animals were found trapped and rotting. She was taken to a mental hospital after the police and doctors concluded that she had a mental illness due to living in isolation for a long time. No information or identification documents of hers were found. After only 2 weeks, she escaped from the hospital and disappeared. Although the police's conclusion was due to illness and circumstances, I thought that woman was like the reincarnation of Satan. My name's Ethan, 21, and I go to a community college. I babysit part-time, mostly in the evenings, so parents can take a break or go out for a bit. The job's pretty easy: keep the kids safe, play with them, and make sure they're asleep before mom and dad get back. But that night at the Cole's place, things didn't go as planned. The Cole house was in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Colorado, a typical 2-story place with a pitched roof, red brick walls, and a big yard full of flowers. Inside, it was neat, pretty simple, but still cozy. The living room was lit up by a small chandelier hanging from the ceiling, and the walls had a few hand-drawn pictures, probably Lucas's, the 7-year-old I'm watching. Lucas had autism. He was a quiet kid, usually caught up in his own little world instead of chatting with people. I always tried to make sure he's comfortable, like he was understood. That night, Lucas was on the floor, completely focused on his Lego blocks, carefully putting each piece together. I sat on the couch watching, throwing in a few words here and there to encourage him. Around 10, I told him it was bedtime. He didn't argue, just packed up his toys and headed upstairs on his own, his blue striped nightgown swishing behind him. I followed, switched on the room light, helped him get his bed ready, and said goodnight. Lucas's room was big but simple. His single bed was pushed up against the wall with a big white wooden wardrobe next to it. The soft glow from his moon-shaped nightlight made the room feel warm and safe. I headed back to the living room, grabbed the book sitting on the table, and flipped it open. Around midnight, a sound snapped me out of my focus. A tiny voice, almost a whisper, drifted down from upstairs. I set the book down and headed up, my footsteps making the wooden stairs creak. Lucas's door was slightly open, the soft glow of his nightlight spilling into the hallway. I nudged the door open and stepped inside. He was sitting on his bed, staring straight at the wardrobe. "Lucas, you're still up?" I kept my voice low, but I couldn't hide my curiosity. He didn't respond. His eyes stayed locked on the wardrobe, and his small hands tapped rhythmically on the bed, something I'd seen him do plenty of times before. "What are you doing?" Lucas turned his head just a little, his big round eyes glinting in the dim light.
"I'm imitating my friend,"
he whispered. My heart skipped a beat. When I asked about his friend, Lucas pointed straight at the closet. I glanced over, but nothing seemed off. The closet door was shut, its smooth surface catching the dim light from the room. I walked over and rested a hand on his shoulder. "You should get some sleep. Your friend's probably tired too." Lucas nodded slowly, then lay down. I pulled the blanket over him, switched off the light, and quietly shut the door behind me. Back in the living room, I tried to pick up where I left off in my book, but my mind just wouldn't focus. A weird feeling crept over me, like someone was watching from behind. Then it happened again, that strange rattling sound coming from Lucas's room. I jumped up and rushed upstairs, heart hammering in my chest. Lucas's door was still slightly open. I pushed it wider and stopped. Lucas was sound asleep, curled up under his blanket, face peaceful, breathing slow and steady. But the wardrobe door was open. A faint flickering light glowed from inside, even though I was sure I'd turned off every light in the room. My pulse pounded in my ears. My hand shook as I reached out and touched the cold wooden door. I pulled the door open, and a soft green glow slowly emerged. Between the neatly hung clothes, the light flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows. I crouched down and reached for it, an old doll, its paint chipped, its LED eyes flickering weakly in the dark. I shivered a little, trying to shake it off. That had to be the weird light I saw earlier. I turned around fast and the doll blurted out,
"Hello?"
its voice all scratchy and worn, just like it looked. I froze. For a few seconds, I swear the air got colder, like a draft was sneaking in from somewhere. I set the doll on the shelf, shut the closet door, and headed back to the living room. Tried to brush it off, but I couldn't. The whole night, I kept jumping at every little sound, this uneasy feeling creeping over me, as something I didn't know where it came from and what it was. The next morning, when Lucas's parents got home, I gave them a quick rundown of his day, left out the part about his friend and the whole closet thing. There was something in Lucas's eyes, this mix of innocence and something else, something almost secret. I had no idea where to even start. Before heading out, I walked over to Lucas, trying to keep my smile as natural as possible. "Sleep okay last night?" Lucas nodded, his big blue eyes locked on me.
Yeah, but my friend didn't.
I hesitated. "Who's that?"
He likes the wardrobe. He only comes out after you go to bed. I don't think he likes you.
Lucas said it so casually, like it was just another random fact. I had no idea how to respond. I just gave him a quick pat on the head and headed for the door. The morning sunlight felt good on my skin, but that uneasy feeling still clung to me. As I walked past Lucas's window, I glanced back without thinking. The wardrobe door was shut, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was still inside. Back home, I tossed my coat on the table and figured I'd make myself a coffee. But before I could take a step, I heard it. A small noise. That same faint rattling. I turned around. My bag sat on the chair, zipper halfway open. Inside was the doll. How the hell did it get there? Had Lucas slipped it in when I wasn't looking? I glanced around, that weird feeling creeping up again, like someone was watching me. Maybe I was just imagining things, or maybe Lucas's friend had decided to stick around. I'm Dylan, I'm 10, and I'm the youngest of 4 brothers. Last summer, my family moved into a vacation home in Staunton, this little town in central Illinois. My family was going to be here for about 2 weeks before my brothers and I head back to school and wrap up our vacation. Our house is at the end of the road into town. It's not so big, but it's got enough space for the 6 of us. Next to the house, there's this little path that goes to a big cornfield full of dry, deep yellow corn cobs. Under the corn plants, there are some wild, empty spots where the sunlight barely gets through, so it's all dark down there. Every now and then, a light breeze comes through, making the cornfield sway a little and giving off this rustling sound, kinda like a whisper from the shadows. This whole scene, even though it's simple and pretty, had this weird pull that got me and my 4 brothers excited. We'd always invite each other to the cornfield to play hide and seek. Since I'm the youngest in the family, my brothers were always messing with me the most when we played. Tyler was the oldest, always bossing everyone around, and he knew exactly how to get us to do what he wanted. Connor was easygoing, always going along with all the pranks Tyler and I came up with. Parker, the middle brother between Connor and me, always tried to act all grown up, never admitting if he was scared, even though no one really knew if he was or not. We hopped over the low wooden fence and ran right into the cornfield. The corn plants were tall, stretching out their leaves like big, thick arms. I could feel the breath of the earth and trees around me, like I was totally surrounded. When the game started, I was the first one to find the others. I was excited, but also worried about the pranks they could pull at any moment. The cornfield was very wide, and the leaves blocked my view. I thought to myself, if someone ran past, they'd totally disappear in the next second. While I was searching, I heard some loud, heavy breathing, which meant one of my brothers was hiding really close by. I walked really quietly, each step sinking into the soft soil, gently moving the leaves and shouting loud, trying to scare someone, but there was no one there. I took a deep breath, ready to keep searching. But for some reason, the air around me suddenly felt really thick and hard to breathe. The corn plants seemed taller and thicker, starting to cover the sky and making everything feel darker, even though it was still light out. I started to lose my patience, pushing hard with my hand and breaking some corn stalks at the same time. Because of that, I saw someone standing in the distance. I tried to keep my excitement in check. It was definitely one of my 3 brothers. I quickly ran toward the figure, but then all 3 of my brothers suddenly yelled, and I froze. My brothers called that the game was over, and our parents told us to come back for dinner. They seemed pretty mad when they found out we'd snuck into the cornfield. I turned around to look at the shadow from earlier, but the person was gone. Hearing my brothers calling louder and more urgently, I quickly left. After dinner, I asked my brothers if anyone had seen a tall person in the cornfield, and they all said no. I didn't buy it because they'd messed with me so many times before, so I asked again, and they still said no. The next day, my brothers invited me to play hide and seek again, and I totally agreed, of course. I was the one who had to search. I couldn't forget that weird feeling when I saw the shadow in the cornfield. When I got ready to search for the second time, I couldn't focus on finding my brothers. All I could think about was the shadow that passed by the day before. I walked deeper into the field, right where I remembered seeing that person. The sunlight started to fade, and the space around me got even more blurry. The wind blew through the corn rows, making this creepy rustling sound. Suddenly, I heard footsteps crunching on the dry leaves, making this loud, clear, and echoing sound. I turned toward the sound and called out Connor's name, and all I got was a giggle, but I was sure it wasn't Connor. The laugh was really deep and loud. "Can I play with you guys?" Log's same deep voice, then this crazy, uncontrollable laugh. My heart was pounding, my legs were shaking, and I couldn't move. My eyes were wide, staring at the swaying corn plants as a tall figure moved through them. And then, a guy showed up in front of me. He was so tall, way taller than anyone I'd ever met. He was built big, with muscles that looked like he'd been working out for years. His face had this fierce look, like it was full of anger and hostility. His features were pretty rough, sharp chin, high nose, and his brown eyes were deep, full of malice. His skin was pale, like he hadn't seen sunlight in forever. But what gave me the most chills was his smile. That smile was twisted, weird, and very mocking. A chill ran down my spine. I couldn't move, couldn't say a word, just standing there, frozen, like my limbs were stuck. The fear started in the soles of my feet and spread all through my body. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I was breathing heavy, wheezing like there was no air left in my lungs. It felt like the whole world just stopped, leaving only that guy and me, a 10-year-old kid. Dylan! My name echoed in the air, like a scream cutting through the silence of the cornfield. Connor's voice was like a lifeline, pulling me out of the fear. Dylan! The call came again, louder and more familiar. I screamed as loud as I couldn't handle the fear inside me for another second. I freaked out, running toward Connor's voice, my feet barely touching the ground. Everything around me was a blur, like some nightmare. I don't even remember when I ran into the house. I locked the door, ignoring my brother's and parents' calls. My chest felt heavy, and I was breathing fast. After that, I couldn't talk or act normal anymore. I just found myself stuck in nightmares, where that weird guy was still standing there, his mocking smile haunting me every night. My parents, worried about how I was doing, decided to cut the vacation short, head back to the city, and take me to the hospital. Once I was feeling better, I told my parents everything. They looked at me, worried, and all my brothers and I got lectured for not listening. After that, I never went back to that vacation house again. Even though time passed and everything started to calm down, that fear and the image of that guy still wouldn't leave me.
I'm Glenda, 28 years old. I just moved into an apartment after my lease ended at my old place. My apartment's in a mid-range complex with 2 buildings facing each other. I spent a couple weekends cleaning the place and grabbing some stuff. I worked hard to make the place comfier, and I was pretty proud of how it turned out. But I didn't see the nightmare coming my way. I went to open the window for some fresh air on the 7th floor, the top floor, and spotted a dark shadow by the window in the apartment across from mine. I didn't think much of it and just kept looking around my neighborhood, feeling this weird kind of happiness. Later that evening, while I was chilling on the couch watching TV, I glanced over at the window of the apartment across, and that same dark shadow from earlier was still there. I looked a little closer, and it seemed like it was a guy, but I didn't think much of it. It'd be kind of weird to just stare into someone else's window. Pretty quickly, I got my life on track in the new place. I said hi to the neighbors, trying to make some good connections. On the second evening, after getting home from work, the first thing I did was head to the window and throw the curtains open to let some fresh air in. I was kind of shocked to see that black shadow still at the window across the way. The owner of that apartment probably just loved chilling by the window and people watching. That night, I stayed up pretty late dealing with some last-minute work stuff. By the time I wrapped up, it was almost 2 a.m. Even though I was super tired, the second I looked at the window, I was wide awake. The black shadow was still there, hadn't moved at all since 8 hours ago. I started getting a weird feeling, so I closed the curtains and went back to my room. It took me forever to fall asleep. The next morning, I ran into my neighbor as soon as I left the house. She said she'd been living here for almost 10 years, so I asked her about the apartment on the 7th floor in the building across. His name's Charles, around 60 years old. You're better off staying away from that old guy if you don't want any trouble. He's been caught up in a bunch of lawsuits for invading people's privacy. People around here don't want to mess with him because of that. I got chills when I heard my neighbor's story. So Charles has been following me for the last 2 days. My mind was racing as I tried to think back on everything, making sure I hadn't messed up with my behavior or what I was wearing. I felt like a lost soul all day, couldn't focus on anything. I was just stoked to find a new place, But now I had to live in fear and be super careful because of my neighbor's weird and creepy reputation. I'd never opened any of the curtains in my apartment, not even for a sec. This went on for 3 days, and I felt super suffocated. I called the building security and told them what was going on, hoping they'd step in and sort it all out. I decided not to show up to avoid making a scene since I had just moved in. About 2 days after I talked to building security, feeling a bit more at ease, I finally opened the curtains again. But surprisingly, the shadow was still there. I quickly called security again, and they said they couldn't get in touch with Mr. Charles. He might have gone to his son's for a few days. This isn't the first time we couldn't reach him. Are you guys serious? He's still at the window, staring at my apartment. We'll check it out and sort this ASAP. I stopped paying attention to what the security guard was saying. Remembering the binoculars my dad gave me back in high school, I started digging through the unpacked boxes to find them. I yanked the curtains all the way open and threw the window open, then grabbed the binoculars to check out the apartment across the street. At first, my head was spinning, so I put down the binoculars and started having a hard time breathing. Shakily, I lifted the binoculars to double-check what I saw, and that was the worst decision I ever made. The window of the apartment across the street had a man's body standing there with his head pressed against the glass. His body had patches of skin hanging down, and his eye sockets were dark and deep, with his mouth wide open like he was totally freaking out. I let out a huge scream, and the sound of terror echoed from the top floor, shattering the quiet vibe of the place. I rushed out of the house, banging on all the neighbors' doors, begging them to call the cops ASAP. The body was Mr. Charles, who had died about a week ago from a stroke. He had a pretty bad reputation, according to the neighbor, so nobody really cared that he hadn't showed up in days. Mr. Charles had a son living in the next city, and when he heard about his dad's death, he looked totally shocked and devastated. He played it off by saying they weren't really that close, which is why he hadn't checked in on Mr. Charles for days. I moved out of that apartment right away and crashed at a hotel for a few days before finding a new place. Even now, 8 years after that crazy incident, I still wonder, why was Mr. Charles standing against the window when he died? Did his stroke really hit him out of nowhere? Or was there something else going on?
I am still haunted by every detail of that night. A cold, windy evening 10 years ago. At that time, we were just mischievous 12-year-olds. Me, Sam, Lisa, and Matt. Before that, we had one more member, Max. Speaking of Max, he was once my close neighbor, but disappeared one rainy day without a trace. The police searched everywhere, but the case went cold. A year had passed since Max's disappearance, and Sam was the one who sparked the idea of exploring the mysterious house of Mrs. Martha, the woman who lived alone at the end of the street. People said she had lived there for many years and knew how to use incantations. Those rumors became the inspiration for us to prove that it was all nonsense. But there was more to it than just curiosity. I remember Max once told me that Mrs. Martha had stared at him for a long time from the window when he passed by her house. Since then, I couldn't stop thinking, could she be connected to Max's disappearance? I immediately agreed when I heard the suggestion from Sam, Lisa, and Matt, though I reluctantly followed. That night, Mrs. Martha's house loomed like a ghost in the dark. The wooden walls were rotting, the windows covered with dark fabric, and an eerie silence hung in the air, causing us to hesitate. Sam quietly opened a basement window at the side of the house, and the group crept inside. Inside, it was pitch black, and the air was heavy as if no one had lived there for many years. The air was thick, and every step echoed eerily. Black and white photos hung on the walls, but they were all faded and hard to make out. On a shelf, I saw strange jars filled with dark liquid, each etched with the name of a child. My hand trembled as I touched the jar with Max written on it. In a small room at the end of the second-floor hallway, I found something that shattered all my doubts. A wooden toy ship, the gift I had given Max for his 5th birthday. Around it were other toys I recognized as children's belongings. My heart tightened, and a flood of questions overwhelmed me. Lisa entered, her eyes wide with panic. "We should go," she whispered. "No." Sam said, "We need to find more. She's definitely hiding more terrifying things." Suddenly, a raspy laugh echoed from behind. "Get out of here," she said, her voice seeming to come from somewhere far away, although she was standing right in front of us. We panicked. Sam shouted, "Run!" and the whole group rushed out of the room. Behind us, Mrs. Martha's slow footsteps drew nearer and nearer. Sam grabbed the door handle and yanked it, but it was useless, and he screamed in despair. "She's coming!" Lisa screamed, her eyes locked on the dark figure moving closer. In the chaos, Sam turned and ran straight for the window, yelling loudly and jumping out. I ran to him, only hearing the sound of glass shattering. When I looked down, I saw Sam's lifeless body on the ground, blood spilling around him. "The secret is not for the curious," Mrs. Martha's voice echoed again. The sound of footsteps pounding through the dark hallway made my panic worsen. I had no choice but to run, not caring about direction, and then thud. I stepped on a loose floorboard, and beneath it was a dark, narrow space, just wide enough for someone to crawl through. "Here! There's a way out!" I shouted, my voice hoarse with fear. The group immediately rushed to me. Matt and I struggled to lift the floorboard, but it was stuck as if something underneath was holding it in place. Matt quickly searched for something to pry it loose. Matt fumbled around in the dark room and found an old oil lamp on a shelf. With a bit of light, we quickly took turns pushing and prying. As we struggled with the board, we heard footsteps coming from the stairs. That voice wasn't loud, but it reverberated throughout the house, as if coming from every corner. The raspy voice was like a curse. "Don't think you can escape. The darkness will keep you forever." My head spun. Lisa began to sob uncontrollably, clutching my hand, while Matt froze, his hands trembling around the oil lamp. I used all my strength to kick at the board. Finally, the board popped up, revealing a narrow, dark tunnel below. A gust of cold air rushed up from the hole, carrying the smell of damp earth and decay. I pushed Lisa through first. She trembled, shaking her head, but there was no time for hesitation. Matt shoved Lisa down right after, and then I followed. Just then, I heard Mrs. Martha's footsteps coming toward us. Her steps were slow, but they sent a chill down my spine. I turned one last time. Mrs. Martha was getting closer, but she wasn't walking. She seemed to glide across the floor, without a sound. Her eyes fixed on me, and her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. I didn't hesitate for a second, diving into the passage and pulling the board back into place. Darkness engulfed everything. There was no light, no sound except for our heavy breathing. The passage was narrow and low, forcing us to crouch down to move. Mrs. Martha's footsteps above us still echoed, though faint. It was like the slow, heavy beat of a heart, slow but relentless. I dared not look back, only pushing myself to move faster. We kept going, and then, after what felt like an eternity, a faint light appeared ahead. I felt as though I hadn't breathed in hours. When we crawled out of the tunnel, we found ourselves behind the house near some thick bushes. The sky outside was still dark, but the moonlight faintly illuminated the path ahead. In that moment, running into the darkness was the only safe and viable option. The people who would surely come next were our parents and the police. The police concluded that Sam died from multiple injuries. The sight of Sam lying motionless on the ground haunted me so much that every breath felt stuck in my chest. Lisa collapsed, clutching her head, her sobs blending with broken, fragmented words. Matt stood frozen, his vacant stare locked on the bloodstain below the window, his hands trembling as if trying to hold on to something invisible to keep from falling apart. After several months of continuous investigation, the police finally uncovered the truth when they found Mrs. Martha hiding in an abandoned house several dozen miles from the town. They discovered horrifying evidence linking her to several child disappearances, including toys, clothes, and detailed journals documenting her targets. Mrs. Martha confessed that she carried out these acts due to a warped belief in an ancient ritual, sacrificing children to extend her life. According to her, the dark jars with each child's name weren't just symbols, they were part of a ritual to lock the children's souls into eternal darkness. Although the police dismissed the supernatural elements of her confession, they couldn't explain certain strange occurrences, like the disappearance of the jars or items mysteriously showing up in the homes of the victims. Mrs. Martha was sentenced to life in prison, but her story continued to haunt the town for many years. I, Lisa, and Matt, the lucky ones who survived, carried with us psychological scars that were hard to heal. I still can't forget her deep, haunting gaze that night. I'm Claire, a 22-year-old senior at Kent State. Back in my second semester of freshman year, I babysat in the evenings to make some extra cash. That ended up being both my first and last part-time job, because it was straight up traumatic. This happened 3 winters ago. The Smith's house sits in a quiet neighborhood out in the Ohio suburbs. The roof was covered in snow, and the warm yellow glow from the windows made it look super cozy. Inside, their 2-story house felt homey. The furniture was all neatly arranged, family photos lined the walls, and the wooden floors had this nice shine to them. I was looking after Max, their 3-year-old son, who was happily playing with his favorite teddy bear, his little eyes full of curiosity. I spent the evening taking care of him, feeding him, telling him stories, and putting him to bed. Max's room was small but cozy, the nightlight taking the edge off the cold outside. As he drifted off, clutching his teddy bear, I checked the baby monitor to make sure I had a clear view, then headed back to the living room. Curled up on the sofa with a book, I enjoyed the peaceful moment of a winter night. Around 1 a.m., I was startled by a rustling sound coming from the monitor. The noise was small but clear, like the sound of clothes rubbing together or someone moving in Max's room. As I stared at the screen, a chill ran down my spine. Max wasn't in his crib anymore. The boy stood in the middle of the room, his small frame motionless. His eyes were empty, devoid of emotion, staring directly at the camera as if he were watching me through the screen. My heart pounded. Max was only 3 years old. How could he climb out of the crib that high? I told myself it could be a device malfunction, but the image was too real to be just a technical issue. Grabbing the baby monitor, I headed upstairs. The wooden floor creaked under me, and with every step, the air felt colder. When I pushed open Max's door, I just stood there, stunned. He was still sound asleep in his crib. I glanced back at the monitor. Max's creepy, motionless figure was gone. Now, it just showed him peacefully sleeping. I scanned the room, everything looking normal, except for one small thing. His teddy bear, the one he'd been holding, was now on the floor a few steps from the crib. I picked it up, placed it back in Max's hand, and tried to shake off the unease. Maybe the boy dropped the teddy bear while sleeping. But why was it so far away? Back in the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The cold sank into my skin, making my heart race. That eerie image of Max standing frozen in the middle of the room wouldn't leave my mind. About half an hour later, as I tried to relax, a loud noise came from upstairs. A child's giggles, mixed with light but hurried footsteps, as if Max were running around the room. I quickly walked up the stairs and opened Max's door. He was still lying there, fast asleep. But the window was wide open, and the cold wind blew in, making the curtains flutter. In a panic, I looked back at the monitor. The light from the camera flickered, and then suddenly, a blurry figure crossed the frame. It was taller than a child, moving so fast that I couldn't see it clearly. The next morning, I told Mrs. Smith, Max's mother, everything. She listened but seemed uneasy, her eyes awkward, and her forced smile made me feel like she wasn't too surprised. She said that Max had talked about a friend who played with him at night. This friend didn't like strangers, especially me. A chill ran through me, but Miss Smith just gave an awkward smile and said kids have wild imaginations. Then she mentioned hearing footsteps at night or finding windows open for no reason. Mrs. Smith revealed a detail that made my skin crawl. The house was built on the grounds of an old mental asylum that was demolished in the 1970s. The locals whispered that the land had issues, but the Smith family didn't believe in ghost stories. They stayed because they had never encountered anything truly dangerous, at least not until now. After that night, I decided to quit. Nothing dangerous happened, but that creepy feeling never left me, and I just couldn't do the job anymore. The Smith family decided to move a few months later. One day, when I happened to run into them in town, Mrs. Smith said that Max still talked about his friend. He said the friend was sad he left. Sometimes, Max even said he saw the friend standing outside the window, watching him. I still don't know what really happened that night, but every time I think back, I can't shake the feeling that someone's still watching me from the shadows. The cold, Max's empty eyes, and the blurry figure on the baby monitor, they still haunt me to this day. I am Sarah, and my husband is Mark. We have been married for over a year. My husband and I moved into a small apartment in downtown Chicago 6 months ago. This apartment is connected to a storage room in the basement, where residents can store extra belongings. We thought we had found the perfect place, convenient, close to the center, and affordable rent. But what happened a week before St. Patrick's Day turned our lives into a nightmare. It all started on a chilly evening in early March. I was lying on the sofa watching an old movie while Mark was busy in the kitchen preparing dinner. The smell of grilled meat filled the apartment, blending with the soft music from the speakers. But then, I heard a strange sound. It was a sound coming from the basement, like whispers mixed with the sound of dragging footsteps on the concrete floor. I sat up suddenly, my heart pounding, and looked at Mark. "Do you hear anything?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Mark stopped, focused on listening. The whispers stopped abruptly, leaving a heavy silence. My husband shrugged. Probably just the wind. But I knew he didn't fully believe it either. It didn't just stop there. In the nights that followed, we kept hearing strange noises, dragging objects, unclear whispers, sometimes the soft clinking of metal. I started feeling uneasy. Once, when I went down to the basement to grab a few old boxes, I could feel the air was heavier and colder than usual. The fluorescent light flickered on the ceiling, casting flickering shadows on the walls. It felt like someone was watching me from the darkness. Mark tried to reassure me. "Maybe someone in the building is using the storage room at night. We're not the only ones here." He was right, but the unease continued to grow inside me. Things escalated on the Friday night, a week before St. Patrick's Day. Mark and I decided to check the basement to find out where those mysterious sounds were coming from. We took a flashlight with us, as the lights in the basement often flickered. The cold air hit our faces as we opened the door leading to the basement. The wooden stairs creaked underfoot, and each step made me feel like I was sinking deeper into a place where I didn't belong. As we neared the storage area, we could hear the whispers more clearly. It wasn't the voice of one person, but of many. A rhythmic sound, like a strange chant. The light from the flashlight swept across the metal doors of the storage rooms, but everything was silent and empty. Until we reached the end of the hallway. The door to one of the storage rooms was ajar. A faint red light spilled out from inside, along with a pungent smell, like metal and damp earth. Mark motioned for me to stand behind him. He slowly pushed the door open, and the scene inside froze both of us. Inside were a group of about 4 or 5 people, all wearing white masks decorated with green patterns like for a festival. In the center of the room, on the cold concrete floor, was a dead sheep. Bloodstains surrounded it, and they stood in a circle, hands raised as if performing a ritual. They were mumbling strange chants, their voices monotone, haunting. Mark pulled me back, trying not to make a sound. We nearly ran back up the stairs, slammed the door shut, and called the police immediately. While we waited, I couldn't stop shaking. "What are they doing, Mark?" I whispered, my voice wavering. He just shook his head, holding me tight, but I could feel he was panicking too. When the police arrived, I breathed a sigh of relief. 6 armed officers went down to the basement with us. The storage room door was now closed. One of the officers opened the door, and the flashlight beam illuminated the inside, but the room was completely empty. There was no blood, no sheep carcass, and no trace of the masked figures. All that was left was an empty, cold space. I stood frozen, feeling like reality was playing tricks on me. "We definitely saw them," I insisted, my voice trembling. But the officers looked at each other, their expressions clearly doubtful. They searched the entire basement, even knocking on other doors, but found nothing. No footprints, no bloodstains, no sign that the strange ritual had ever taken place. After the police left, Mark and I hardly spoke. We sat on the sofa, staring at the darkness that enveloped the apartment. No one slept that night. I couldn't stop thinking about the masked figures, and the chanting still echoed in my head. The next morning, we encouraged each other to return to normal life, but when we stepped out of the house, the eyes of the other residents in the building seemed to burn holes into us. I got goosebumps, squeezed Mark's hand, and we both walked quickly. In the days that followed, we never dared to go down to the basement again. The strange noises disappeared, but the silence made me feel even more uneasy. We decided to move out right after St. Patrick's Day, unable to bear the feeling of invisible threat in our own home. But the image of that ritual still follows me, like a ghost that won't let go.